Right before I start the video, I'll probably say hi to everybody.
You just said hi to them. Most of them can hear you now.
Okay.
Hi,
everybody.
All right. Hello, everybody who's joining us. Hey, and we got more. I'll be getting looking to my right every now and again to admit more of you. I appreciate all of you joining us today, especially on short notice. You are all free to use the chat. I would ask that you remain muted throughout. You have the option to have your video on or not. I generally recommend at this stage to keep video off, but you are welcome to keep it on at this stage. Just make sure your background is anime and superheroes, or at least Godzilla stomping on a new city you've designed. But turning off your video is absolutely fine. I recommend doing this in speaker view and not in grid view. We're all used to grid view. Go ahead and go to speaker view. You'll be much happier if you just see Will than if you're seeing everybody else who's distracting you. So it is definitely a privilege for the Southern Interactive Entertainment and Game Expo to be able to bring you this presentation from Will Wright. We've had some illustrious speakers, but the only one who can claim as much impact on the gaming industry as Will Wright was when we brought Nolan Bushnell, the creator of Atari. There are very few people who can claim to have created an entire genre of games, and that is definitely what we can lay at Will's door. In fact, my own Mall Tycoon, one of my best-selling games I ever created, Take-Two advertised it under the table as The Sims Go Shopping, even though they had no right to the name. So sorry about that, Will. I blame Take-Two. But apparently that tag sold a whole lot. Now, I really wanted to start this entire Zoom with a video of a battleship being destroyed, because to be honest, the game I might have played the most of Will's was Raid on Bungling Bay. I blew up that battleship in that game many, many times. It had one of the most satisfying end games where that battleship would pixelate away into nothingness that I ever enjoyed. But I played a lot of Sims and SimCity as well. Enjoyed a great deal of Spore, and I'm very much looking forward to the upcoming projects. And that is really one of the best things about Will, and the reason we're having this specific session. Will Wright is working on another great game. He's put together a team of some wonderful people. Tim Johnson I've worked with before. Lauren Elliott I know by reputation. The others are also some of the stellar individuals. And I'm really looking forward to the next game. There's been some information about it online, but this is really, as far as I've seen, the first time the curtains are being pulled back on what is going to be a very innovative project. And better than that, it's an innovative project that is inviting all of you to become involved. So at this session, we're definitely looking forward to Will Wright running a masterclass in general on game design, including artists and designers, but also talking about the new tools that you will get access to immediately after the Zoom. And you are the very first people to get access to these tools. So sign up for them. Rejoin us Friday for Will's keynote address at Siege on our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing the links later on in the chat. And then Tim Johnson will be running a workshop on Sunday explaining how to use the tools. And again, you, the participants in this session, will have the first access to the 50 slots for that workshop. So we've been doing Siege for 14 years. We've had some great speakers. Will Wright is one of those I've been trying to get for a long time. And I'm really glad that the stars aligned to bring him here, even if it involves COVID. So we went virtual this year. But it is my pleasure. And Will, glad to turn it over to you. And thank you for joining us at Siege today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to start by showing you a very short video that just to give you some context of the idea. The parts of this idea will seem very familiar to you. Other parts are a little outside the box. So let me play the short video first, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail kind of about where this idea is going. So let me see if I can manage this. 1 second.
Perfect.
Inside of each of us, there's the subconscious. There's a whole region of who you are that is, in some sense, inaccessible to you, but drives your behavior. The game I'm working on now is called Proxy, and my core motivation there is, can I build a gameplay experience, an entertainment experience, where the computer is actively trying to gain a deeper understanding of the player, primarily through the player's past experiences, through their memories. Can I kind of interpret the memories of your life, the most important memories that made you who you are, and from that come to some understanding of how you think, what makes you behave the way you behave, why you connect these certain things in your mind that most people don't connect, what drives your interests, how much can I get a computer to learn that about you, and then try to build a representational avatar of your id, of your subconscious, that you can now interact with. And as it learns more and more about you, it kind of, in some sense, comes to life and can now interact with other people's ids kind of asynchronously. It can go off in the world and interact with your friends or with, real or historic or fictional characters. How does your proxy get along with Homer Simpson's proxy, or, the Pope's proxy, or Mother Teresa? I want to know, can we build a map of that? Can we start to understand it? Can we build, a structural description of how this thing works and the connections it makes, and what makes you different from another person? How is your id different than that person's id? How does it make you behave in a situation differently than they behave? If we can start getting that level of understanding, and I think that analyzing memories and life experience is the path there. And I'm not sure about this. This is just kind of my theory. But that's kind of what we're trying to do with Proxy. Okay, so that's the short description. Hopefully you all were able to see that. Now, there's been a lot of cool science fiction stories about, what if you were to take somebody, scrub their memories, and put a whole new set of memories into them, and the essence of it is that you would be a different person. I mean, who you are, how you think, how you behave is really just a function of all the memories that you wake up with every day. You wake up and, that's who you are, and again, there've been some very cool science fiction stories about that. But so that became our starting point for this whole thing. The idea that you are your memories, who you are is everything, your worldview and everything is based upon the memories you have of your life experience. So those became kind of in essence, the Lego pieces for the project that we're working on now. So step one, and I'm going to kind of go back to screen sharing here just a little bit, if I can. And we have these concept boards. Are y'all seeing this okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So at the basic level, and this is, just one of the design tools that we use a lot. At the very basic level, we start with the idea of creating a memory. And a memory at its most basic is a set of keywords that you put in that, and they're actually categorized in several categories. There's time, there's place, people, objects, emotions, and actions. And so you might put in Uncle Bob, that's a person. I might put in, snorkeling, that's an activity. I might put in scary, that's a feeling or emotion. I might put in summer of 1942. Now these are all open keywords, so you can put in, however you want. I could, for time, I could put in August 12th, 1985, or I could put in summer, or I could put late night. So I might have a memory of, late night when I was in college. We used to go out and do, X, Y, and Z. But Proxy uses just these keywords to start building these very kind of deep associative networks that we apply a lot of AI. So for instance, I might put in cat or dog as a concept, but underneath the hood, Proxy will start realizing that those are both probably pets, and there's probably a relationship between, cat and dog, or might be the specific cat and dog that you owned at some point in your life. And then Proxy starts building all these kind of maps of association. So at the most basic level, Proxy is about curating memories. Now, as somebody enters a memory, we then have a lot of tools for the person to be able to then add graphics. It could be photographs, it could be models, could be, ambient sound effects. But basically, these tools are used to you build almost like little snow globes of your memory. And so every memory that you build, including graphics, keywords, concepts, kind of becomes a little snow globe that then gets placed on a landscape. And the user is actually, as they play the game, they're manipulating these memories around on this landscape they're building. We're actually building a world of memories, almost like that Disney movie, Inside Out. And if they have shared concepts, you'll see little roads kind of going between these memories. And in fact, you're encouraged, this part becomes a bit more like SimCity, that it's actually a world building game and there are resources and things in there. On the tool side, we're putting a lot of effort into, what are interesting ways that you can kind of create these memories? What are objects you can put into these snow globes? What are sound effects or ambience? And then there's a whole economy about these memories interacting with each other. And that's actually, as you're earning resources, you're encouraged to put memories that share a lot of concepts on specific areas of the landscape. And so you might have a whole island that's just vacation island, or my college days, or tragedies in my life. It's going to be up to each user to kind of curate this world of memories that they are creating. But these memories are actually constructed out of keywords that the user is entering and assets that other players are creating. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper later in terms of how these tools work and what they are. But some of the assets that users are creating will be these little kind of iconographic 3D models or photographs or sound effects that go into the memories. Another one will be kind of decorative items that go on the landscape. As you zoom away from the landscape, you're actually building a whole little world of these memories. And each user is kind of curating how they would organize these memories. One person might organize it one way, another person might organize it another way. But then at this point, there's a lot of resource allocation. You're actually earning in-game currency by little agents moving between these memories that have shared concepts. So for instance, you might have one memory that has the name of your cat, another memory that has the name of your dog. But underneath the hood, Proxy, the AI, starts realizing these are both probably pets. Pets is a shared concept, which will now link these memories together within the world. And if you put them in close proximity to each other, they actually kind of earn you assets. Now, as you pull away from the world, and this is all different zoom levels. At the tiniest zoom level, we're at the memory level. Next zoom level, we're at the world level, placing these memories on a landscape. As we pull away from the world itself, we are now starting to build a map of your mind, of the way you think. And now these concepts that you've entered into memories become part of this elaborate topology. And we start trying to build, what we're calling a psychograph of the way you think. What concepts do you kind of apply next to each other? And, this might be, in fact, how you associate this particular person with a place or an emotion or an activity. Or it might be how you particularly associate this thing with a time or an emotion. And this is what we're calling the psychograph. So we're actually kind of trying to build a map of your mind after we've had you input these memories from your life and curate them on the world. Now we start building basically a psychograph of how you think and how you associate things. And once you get enough of those, you kind of actually go up to the last level, which is now we start building an avatar that we call a proxy. And this proxy is actually going to start representing your id, your subconscious, and the way you think. And at that point, we get into the more social gameplay. You will actually have your proxy be able to interact, kind of with hands off with other proxies. And we also, at the world level, in terms of sharing and social activity, we want players to be able to create shared worlds. So you might have a world here that you decide, you're going to export some of your memories and now have a shared world that you're building with your family or your friends. And at this point, it'll be having shared memories. We might have this memory of the same concert we went to or the same event. And it'll have my impressions of that memory plus your impressions of that memory. And it'll be able to show this the difference. You thought that was really funny. I thought it was really it really sucked, So at this point, we start, comparing, the psychographs of different proxies and looking and accentuating the differences. Also, at a deeper level, as Proxy starts analyzing this stuff, it's going to start building very unique maps that reflect kind of the associations you have. And it might be the associations between people and emotions. I associate this person with being funny or exciting, that person with being scared. And these maps you are actually going to see on the landscape as monuments within the game. And I can go into more and more detail, but in essence, this is what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a game where you are creating memories. Those memories go into a world that you now control and you curate. And from that, we start, trying to build a map of your mind, of how you think and who you are. That's very unique. And we compare it to other people. It turns out that, maybe, most people, if they have the concept of spiders, it might be scary or yucky or whatever. But maybe you decide spiders are tasty or fun. And so it's going to look for those differences relative to the crowd and then drill in on them. Proxy will start asking you questions. Why do you think spiders are tasty? And so to look for the things that make you the most unique and try to explore those deeper and deeper. So we're really trying to accentuate the individuality of each player relative to the other players. And that's a lot of what I think is going to kind of make this interesting with these maps and where it goes, is finding out, what are the things about you that make you, totally unique compared to everybody else. And then you can present that on the social side when you start sharing stuff. Now, I realize that's probably a lot of information very quickly, but at this point, I'd kind of just like to open it to questions, because I think that I can't imagine how confused everybody is at this point.
Will, maybe I don't know if I'm presenting now, but I wonder if I could ask you a question. So as a partner with you, I know one of the things that you've talked about a lot is how users can participate not only in the simulation of themselves, but also in creating the assets in the world and in various things. I know you've talked about The Sims or SimCity, about how all the assets that were created ended up on black markets and things like that first.
Yeah.
But that in this instance, where we're developing these tools, I wonder if you could just spend a few minutes talking about how you felt about assets in your past games and how the users should be more involved.
Well, again, at the basic level, our game is about memories. And kind of our metaphor for a memory here is something like a little snow globe. And, within that snow globe, this is like a little scene that you set up, a little diorama. And it can include 3D assets, 3D models. It can include photographs, sound, ambience, music. That's the point at which, when you think about a memory from your life, it's very particular. And I think people, just in terms of trying to build a snow globe about a memory from their life, they're going to want stuff that's very, specific. That's not the right kind of dog. That wasn't the right kind of car. And these are the tools at which we're allowing people, I might make my old Chevy from 1967 in my memory, and I might create a model of it or get a photograph of it. But at the same time, it is going to become accessible, if you wanted to all the other players, so that when they just type in the keyword Chevy 67, they are going to get a list of all the assets that other players have created that are somewhere near that tag. And so I think that, right off the bat, we have a huge, gamut of the kind of assets that people might want to select from. And if a player creates an asset, let's say I create a model of a 67 Chevy, and I put it in my memory, but it gets accessible to all the others on this marketplace that we're going to have. And there's going to be kind of an in-game marketplace that I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about. But that player who created that asset is going to get in-game credit if somebody else uses it, and it will be accessible, if you allow it to all the other players. So any asset you create for your individual memories is now going to be accessible to everybody else on the marketplace. And the more people use it, the more credit you get and more in-game assets. You're actually earning credits for the assets you create for yourself. Now, these assets also move out to the world level. So I might be wanting to decorate the world, the topology, the landscape with assets that players have created. And this could be stuff like, volcano, waterfall, whatever, statues. So players will also be kind of curating and decorating this world that they're placing their memories in. This is going to be kind of like your trophy chest, but at the same time, it's almost like a garden that you're curating. But again, I will have at my disposal as a player the assets that all the other players have created. And if I choose an asset that another player's created and put it in the land or on a memory, that player will get credit for that. So we're trying to kind of build this deep motivation for players, not only to create assets for themselves in their own worlds, but also give them the reward of all the players now having access to that. And underneath the hood, Proxy is looking again at the concepts that you've entered into those memories, and trying to select the assets that it thinks are the most relevant to what you might want at a particular time.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
In The Sims, it was much more scattershot. It was more like, okay, it's a chair or it's a television. I think we're able to leverage, kind of the AI level right now so much more so than we were back then. And so I think that, what we're dealing with here within a memory is almost anything you can think of. It's just anything in one of these 6 categories, people, places, time, feelings, activities, things. And by pre-categorizing it, by the way, by the fact that the user, when I put in a keyword to my memory and I say, this is a person, that's a place, that's a time, and that's a feeling, the AI gets 10 times easier to deal with. And so we're able to make much deeper associations if we already know that Uncle Bob is a person, summertime is a time, Georgia is a place. And that's going to allow us to do much kind of deeper, more relevant associations.
Excellent, excellent. We've got a lot of questions showing up in chat, but before I start calling on our chat members to share those questions, Will, you've put together a pretty strong team of people with some very diverse skills. Can you speak for 1 minute about the skills you think it takes to make someone a good game developer, and what skills you think will be best used with the tools that you're offering?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I have to thank Lauren Elliott, who's here with me. Just as a backstory, my very first game, which I did when I was in my early 20s, right on Bungay Bay, Lauren was my very first producer back at Broderbund Software. Lauren was the creator of Carmen Sandiego and a number of other things. And I would say, one of Lauren's primary skill sets is putting up with me. But he really understands the process of design, plus, the business side. He was actually instrumental in building our team. I have to give him credit for building the team we have. I think that we have a team, of experienced people like Tim Johnson, Zekmo, and they have created a lot of games. They understand kind of like what it takes to create a game. And the 90%, when you think you're 90% done, you're actually halfway done, and to understand that, you have to have shipped a few games to really kind of get that, which is really about persistence and dedication. And, I think almost everybody on our team is doing this because they love to do it. They're not doing it because it's a job or they can make money from it, but they just really, love the idea that when they get the idea out there, want to have people, build a community, and so quite a while back, I started realizing that, building these things is not so much about building an entertainment experience. It's much more about building a community and getting people emotionally involved, and also the social interactions between them, but I think that, it helps to have an understanding of what's worked and what hasn't worked in games, having played a lot of games before. At the same time, you don't want to start off and say, okay, I'm going to build a better version of Doom. I think that's the wrong way to approach it. I think the mindset of everybody on our team is that, okay, here's a cool idea. We've never seen anything like it. We don't know if it's possible, but we're all convinced it is. And we are going to pursue it to the ends of the earth, and that's kind of the dedication side. It involves a lot of exploration. I mean, we take a lot of dead ends. We do a lot of prototypes that don't work out, a lot of art styles that we back up on. And I think a big part of that is not getting frustrated by that process, but kind of celebrating it. If you're going to have a failure, make it a useful failure, learn from it. and go back and then take the right path. But just realize from the very outset, it's going to be, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That is the process of game development. Now, if you're just doing a clone of Doom, that's not so much the case. You just kind of take the blueprint and say, okay, we're going to do this better, that better, and that better. That's a whole different mindset, And so I think we look for, people that want to work on our team that are okay with exploring dead ends, so that by the time we get to that last leaf on the end of that branch, that we are convinced that was the place we wanted to go. We kind of understand the direction we want to go. We don't understand the exact path, but you have to enjoy the process of exploring that path, and not get frustrated by the fact that every now and then you have to take a step backwards.
And I absolutely love that about games being about your community. I used to say that games were big databases and the best games were the ones that hid that fact the best. I no longer agree with it now that I've got my games that are still selling 30 years later, thanks to the community and not me. Games really are about you, the community you form. All right, Hugo, I'm unmuting you. Thanks for all your long service to the GGDA. Go up. I think I just remuted you. There we go. Well, you should have the option to unmute yourself anyway.
There we go.
Go ahead and pick one of your questions and ask away.
Awesome. Well, my question is, right now with Proxy, you're like leveraging AI and these connections in a very interesting way. But especially when thinking about the simulation genre, I think over time from its inception to where we are nowadays, with the increasing complexity of the technology and AI advancements, people have focused more on accuracy and fidelity of simulations versus actually letting some of the game design and creativity flourish that I think was a little bit inherent of the limitations of the medium early on. Like, how do you think people can leverage these technologies to bring some more of that creativity that you're bringing to the table with Proxy?
Well, I mean, you think of a simulation as something that's kind of trying to recreate the world some level. And, we have the world in front of us right now. I mean, I think games, I tend to think of a bit more, even within the simulation genres, as wanting to be more of a caricature of reality. You want to take things and exaggerate them a little bit, make them a little more obvious. It can still give you a lot of insights into the world, and it might be SimCity where you're trying to simulate urban dynamics, or Sims where it's personal dynamics. But I think, you want the computer to kind of accentuate the dynamics and accelerate the dynamics, that you now become kind of a playful space. These are now, kind of toys in a sense. And I think that, and this is a fine line. A lot of people, when I did SimCity, they were saying, well, urban transit's not that effective, or nuclear plants don't, explode like that. There were a lot of inaccurate things we did in SimCity that we knew were inaccurate. We were not trying to do a high fidelity simulation of urban dynamics. We were in fact exaggerating a lot of things. But at the end of the day, this is discretionary time that people are spending. They're it's not like a spreadsheet. They're not forced to use your game. And you're competing with other games. So there is a fine balance, a sweet spot there, because at the end of the day, this has to be something that somebody wants to do, with their free time. And I find that the games that I've really enjoyed the most all had one property that was kind of interesting, was that I was playing the game when I was away from the machine. And it might have been Civilization or whatever, but, I'd be driving down the road and thinking about my next turn in Civilization. Should I do this or should I do that? So I was able to actually download the game in some sense into my imagination, and I was still playing the game in my imagination, even when I was away from the computer. And, so that's something that to me is a very important property of these, is how do we present something to a player that they can actually kind of download a simpler model of and keep playing in their, in their mind, in their imagination. And I find that, making something more of a caricature of it, a simpler version of the model that is now fun to play with. Your brain really enjoys challenges. Your brain enjoys trying to discern patterns and solve problems. And that's the essence of gaming, is kind of getting your brain into that state, where it's enjoying the problem solving. And so that's where I think the caricature, is one step in the right direction.
That's great. Thank you.
Hello. I think I was unmuted.
Okay. Hi, Tony.
Hello. My name is Tony. I had a question about narratives. So a lot of the games you've worked on are or simulator games, typically don't have normal narratives, or at least the more common linear narratives. So
Yeah.
I was curious how you tackle that when you design a game. Do you specifically focus on mechanics or dynamics that lead to user-created narratives, or do you really just focus on creating entertaining mechanics and then hope that the narratives come from that? Is there any process you go through to come up with?
Yeah, I know what you're asking. I'm not sure if those are different with the two things you just mentioned. You know, I love GTA. I played the hell out of GTA, you know, which has a very embedded narrative that I found boring as hell. But I saw these user like machinima things that people did in GTA that were hilarious. I loved. I remember one of the first ones I saw a long time ago was a Canadian in Liberty City. And it was just this guy walking around in Liberty City talking about how they didn't have socialized medicine, and people were kind of mean and they weren't very nice. It was hilarious. And I got really hooked on the idea that, to me, the most important things are the user narratives. I never heard players sitting there having, very deep, motivated discussions about the cutscenes they saw in some game, Counter-Strike, Mario, whatever it is. But I have seen people invest huge amounts in their own, narratives. And those are the things they really enjoy. Even weird things like Battlefield 42, people were making these cool movies about silly things that were happening in the game that, had nothing to do with World War II, obviously. So I've always been struck by the fact that user narratives, to me, have always been an order of magnitude more entertaining than the scripted in-game narratives I've seen in any game almost. I mean, some of them are very nice, but I've always, a lot of game designers have kind of this, I know it's Hollywood envy or whatever, but it's almost like they want to be film directors, not game designers, which is fine. I mean, it's a whole genre game, and I totally appreciate and respect that. But, I think, just seeing the weird stories people were starting to make in SimCity and things like that led me toward The Sims. And with The Sims, I got very convinced of the fact that, okay, we really want to support the user narratives, not, push some in-game narrative. And so the very first thing we did was start putting in this little storybook feature where you could record screenshots and then share them online. It was very simple in The Sims 1. And the response we got was tremendous. We got, tens of thousands of stories, and other people were enjoying viewing them. And one of the funny parts is that these are players that had never really posted anything online before. They made some stupid little story in The Sims, and all of a sudden they got 100 people commenting on their story. And they had never once been told they were creative or anything they were going to make was something that somebody else would want to view. But it was amazing how much that motivated these people that, had never been told they, did something creative before. And so I love the idea of empowering the players, but I think more importantly, I find that the user narratives are personally much more motivating, obviously the players. And, so that's kind of what's driven me towards something like Proxy, where with every game, I feel like I've kind of wanted to get closer and closer to the player, to the point now where I want to kind of get inside their brain and make basically your mind the landscape of the game. And that's kind of the essence of Proxy, is that we're trying to take your inner mind, your id, your subconscious, and make that the gaming landscape.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and tell them your school as well, and anyone else asking questions, your name and school before you ask the question.
Oh, Anthony Dillo, Savannah's College of Art and Design. I major in game design.
And Hugo is
I
also.
spent a lot of time. My brother lives in Charleston, and I spent a lot of time in Savannah. I grew up in
That's
Georgia.
awesome. That's where I am right now, actually.
And also
okay.
SCAD.
There's probably a hurricane heading your way about now.
Yeah. Thank you again.
All right, Ilarium.
Good afternoon, and I'm Hilario Montanes. I'm a game design master's at Full Sail University. My question was, will this be connected to any social media or media sharing technology?
Well, we've already had parts of this kind of as a test connected, Twitter and stuff like that and messaging. So yeah, I can't give you specifics right now, But I think that for sure, at the end of the day, as you go through these levels of creating a memory, then creating a world, then your brain psychograph, and then also a proxy. The proxy basically is an avatar of your id. I love the idea these proxies can now interact through social media. They're allowed to post to your Facebook page, or they can have their own private conversations on, messaging, or post, their insights on Twitter, their epiphanies, But yeah, I really can't go into detail on, we've been doing tests of this already. But yes, there will be connections between this for sure with social media.
And as a follow-up to that, Julian, I am going to move your question up in the queue because I think it's a good question to follow up off of Ilarium. So Julian.
Hi, I'm Julian. I also go to the Design Culture and Design. Big fan, by the way. And I was hoping you could answer my question. Are there any fears about collecting people's data? Are there any bad faith actions that those games may take?
Well, I think one thing, especially with a project like this, that we have to be very clear about and careful about is that, the memories you're entering, all the data you're entering is going to absolutely remain private unless you explicitly choose to share it. I think, what I really want, and this has been a major kind of point of, or, just kind of point of philosophy in our game design here, is that we want to encourage people to put in their real memories about their real life, good and bad, many of which you're not going to want to share with anybody, many of which might be very, very private to you, so that you actually get a fairly accurate map of your psyche. And we have to give players that confidence that's happening, so that whenever we're exporting, we might be comparing your data to the global data to find out what's different about you, but that's very different than sharing it in information outwards. So that when you're actually going to have a shared memory world with other people and you're sharing memories, that we're very explicit about that, and our metaphor really is kind of these planets. This is your personal planet. You can invite somebody in if you really want to, explicitly invite them in, but for the most part, you're going to be taking memories from your private planet and putting them on a shared planet with somebody else, so that you're very clear that these memories are totally private. Those memories are, at least shared within a small group. But yes, that obviously, especially for a project like this, and I'm just playing some game, and I don't really care what people see what I do in a Counter-Strike, but when you're putting in private, memories from your life, that's something that we have to be very, very careful with, and so yeah, that has actually been a very major point of concern on our whole team.
So then, yeah, as a follow-up, if another company tries to sort of, take this idea, they're worried that they might do, assuming they don't have the same philosophy?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we have to, if we're ever going to share your data with anybody else, it has to be explicitly with the permission of the user. Okay, I don't want to ever do that, kind of behind the hood. Oh, by the way, terms of service, down at the bottom of the terms of service, you just given us the permission to do this. I never want to do that. Again, this is a major, major point of concern in this whole design. As we started out from the very beginning, our users are going to be freaked out about sharing this very personal data, because I can't imagine any game that will get as personal with the player as this one, and that really is the point of the game. And that also is one of the biggest risks of the game, so yeah, we take this very seriously.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Juan, JJ, I think that your question is going to be a good follow-up to that, so go ahead.
All right. Hi, my name's Juan. I'm from Kansas State University. My question is basically just how would you address memories that you change your opinion on? Say for example, I used to love the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, and all of a sudden my opinion changes over time. How would it address that type of scenario?
Well, as you play the game, there's a whole discussion about this that's really interesting. That your memories change over time quite a bit. As you play this game, you will probably be entering your current version of these memories. I think back on that, and that was really humiliating. But maybe 10 years from now, I'll think back on that. It was kind of funny. Okay, I got over it. Yeah. And this is actually it's kind of scary. And this is based on a lot of studies that people, every time you recall a memory, from any time in your life, you change it. every single time you recall it, it gets changed. They did a study that was remarkable after 9/11. They interviewed all these people about 2 months later, and these were people in New York that were near, ground zero. What were you doing when the planes hit? And they would say, I was, in my apartment and I looked out the window and this, they would give a very detailed explanation. A year later, they interviewed the exact same people, asked them again, what were you doing when 9/11 happened? And the stories were a little bit different. And they kept doing this every year. And 5 years later, they were asking the same person the same question. At that point, the same person, instead of being in their apartment looking out the window, I was on the street shopping for flowers. And I mean, it was like a totally different memory. And they weren't even aware of the fact that they had been slowly changing the memory every time they recalled it, to the point where it was an entirely different memory. And that's kind of we've been doing a lot of research on memories. And that was one of the weirdest, scariest things to find out. So anytime you're going to enter a memory, it's going to be your current version of that memory, obviously. One of the interesting things about this, will be to go back, after you played this for a while, and look at the old memories you've entered and see, okay, and maybe, you can change it and we'll actually track the differences. This is the trend at which you've been changing that memory. It started out as something you remembered as scary, and now it's turning into something you remembered as funny. I think the same thing will be true between shared memories. You and I, went fishing together. And at some point, there's going to be a very strong divergence between how we resaw that memory. Maybe as we are sharing the memory, it'll converge. We'll agree on the shared, interpretation of that memory. But memories are very slippery. They're not that tangible. And that's kind of one of the things that got me very interested in the whole idea of memory. So, obviously, as you're entering a memory, it's going to be your current version of it. But I think that tracking that over time could potentially be a very interesting thing. And also, at the end of the day, I mean, if I could imagine that my grandmother was playing this game and she had entered all the important memories from her life, I would treasure that. It would be like this heirloom, just being able to go back and look at what she thought the important memories of her life were. And so that's one of my long-term aspirations for this, is that the proxies we build out of this will become things that, you want to pass down to your kids, that it's an autobiography of sorts. But of course, it'll be an autobiography at the time that you wrote it, not at the time necessarily that it happened.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. And Paul, let's continue on this thread. I think your next question will help flesh it out some more too.
Oh, sorry, really quick. By that you meant Paul Melio, me?
Paul Melio, yes.
Ah, excellent. Thank you so much. So really quick, Mr. Wright, pleasure to meet you. Big fan. I'm actually branching off of Tony Dillo's question just a little bit.
And what school?
Oh, sure. Also from SCAD, from Savannah College of Art and Design, and I am a game design major.
Okay.
So really quick. So in regards to what you had spoke about earlier, and which I thought was very interesting, in empowering the player by having their own passive narrative, like a non-scripted narrative, story traditionally does, in a sense, require obstacle. Like, oh no, in Sims, I've removed the pool ladder for the Sims pool. Some people say conflict, but I believe that's a little bit negative. But when you have a fleshed out map of a player's psyche, and with many, many players of your past games using them to have lived vicariously through their characters, is there any consideration on your team right now to be able to have players be able to watch what is effectively themselves in an obstacle? And what I mean by that is a narrative. And this is an extreme analogy, but you had talked earlier about like, oh, volcanoes on the island. Well, most people, at least people not that me, but wouldn't exactly want to watch themselves, run away from a volcano. Is there any consideration to have players have the option to put themselves into situations that would require story or conflict that they can watch and enjoy?
Well, I think that type of thing is going to happen at the proxy level. Now, I didn't really go a lot into what happens when two proxies interact. And again, the proxies are these AI constructs, avatars of the sum of all your memories, behaviors, and associations and feelings. So we will actually have proxies, conversing, interacting, potentially engaging in activities together. I should also, I didn't really cover the idea that, and you kind of slightly touched on it, the idea that, okay, there's proxy of me. These are my memories. This is how I feel. but I might want to create a fictitious proxy. What if I'm creating, one from scratch, but, and one of the things we actually did on the team, early on is we started just as a group doing these socially constructed, group constructed proxies. And so we would pick somebody like, Dorothy from Wizard of Oz or whatever, okay? And we would all put in memories that Dorothy maybe experienced during the Wizard of Oz, to build a proxy of Dorothy. And that's one of the things I really want players to be able to do in a community sense. We might want to constructively create a proxy of Karl Marx or Mother Teresa or some historic figure, or potentially fictitious characters, Dorothy, Homer Simpson, whatever. But that would be more of a Wikipedia thing where a lot of people are contributing and maybe correcting, and maybe their kind of privileges in different levels. But there might be 100 people building an avatar of Joseph Stalin, and now I can have my proxy interact with Joseph Stalin, and we can find out who his best friends are, and there can be a leaderboard for Joseph Stalin's best friends. So I think I want to have this kind of and one of the reasons I want to do this, it's almost kind of a red herring. There's this the whole thing about Batman, way back at the beginning, he's got his, suit, the Batman, and there's a big bright bat on his chest. And one of the justifications was that, if there's a big bright bat on your chest, if people shoot at you, they're probably going to shoot at that as the target. And that's where the armor's the strongest. So it's actually there for a purpose, In the same way, I'd like to have a target where people, when they want to get creative and weird and funny, they go off and they build these other proxies, these, external proxies that, now become part of leaderboards and social competitions and whatever, have challenges like you're talking about, so that they keep their personal proxy pure. They're not encouraged to start adding false memories, just to level of their proxy. I wish my proxy weren't so scared of spiders. I wish my proxy enjoyed water skiing, whatever it is. I'd rather them place those efforts in creating these external proxies, which will now be able to be placed in challenging situations like you're talking about. And it might be your real proxy competing with them or being compared about, and again, GoldenEye had this like cool feature on the Nintendo where at the end of every game, there were all these, leaderboard things, you were the best shot or the best with explosives or the worst at getting stabbed. Every player got some acknowledgement about something unique about them. And, I think that's one of our opportunities, that we really want to find out what is most unique about your personal proxy. And a lot of that will be relative to this universe of third-party proxies that you'll be interacting with.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. No, that's incredibly helpful and insightful. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pull up some of the questions about general game design, and then we'll come back into Proxy specifically. JC, you had a question I think is relevant to all game devs and especially those entering. So JC, if you want to go ahead and ask yours.
Hello.
All right, go ahead and introduce
I
yourself.
am Joseph from Kennesaw. I'm Joseph from Kennesaw State University in the Computer Development and Game Design course. And I just had a question about communication. It's clear that with SimCity, Spore, and now Proxy, you have a lot of history doing new and innovative things that don't really have precedent for them. I wanted to know what some of the big challenges were that you encounter in trying to pitch those ideas either to executive boards or to other game designers and actually getting everybody to stay on the right track to the same vision, and how you overcome those problems.
That's a good question. It depends a lot on when in my history this happened and what project it was. The Sims in particular, it was a huge struggle. Even my own company that I founded, there was very little support within the company for it because it was perceived as a game about taking out the trash and cleaning the toilet. It's as a designer, you kind of, I start with something that excites me and starts formulating in my mind, and one of the very first things you have to do is figuring out a way to get other people excited about it so that they understand what you're saying. I mean, they really understand the direction you want to go. We want to go, northeast. I'm not exactly sure where we're going to end up, but you have to kind of build up an excitement over the core idea. And you really have to kind of get down to, what is the cool, unique thing that is going to make this something special that's never been done before. I've never had an interest in doing a better version of Doom or even SimCity. I hate doing sequels, but so you have to figure out a way to first of all start building the core of your team. And I spend a lot of time just experimenting by telling people an idea and they think it sucks. I describe it a little bit different. It sucks. E3 was actually, every time I was presenting something at E3, I would come in and I would give a 30-minute presentation to a bunch of journalists or whatever. I would watch their reaction. The next group that would come in, I would change a couple things. And I would see if the reaction was better or worse. And so it's Darwinian, really. Your message that you're using to convey the idea is something that you need to be continually trying to evolve to be more fit, more interesting, more motivational. And this happens at different levels. It happens at motivating your team. It happens, at some point at motivating perhaps executives within your company or, funders who are going to fund your project. But a lot of being, I'd say, kind of the lead game designer is about salesmanship. How do you package this idea? And sometimes you want to package it in a way that's a little bit different than the way you think about it. When I started with The Sims, my kind of very basic conception of it was that it was a dollhouse brought to life. But I found very quickly that if I ever mentioned the term dollhouse, that was a really bad idea. Any male in the room would leave the room as soon as I said, do you want to buy a dollhouse? So I learned very quickly never to use that term. With Proxy, there's a term too that I am probably never going to use, but I'll share with you right now, is that, in my mind, this is like the ultimate scrapbooking, okay? But I'm not going to use that externally. I'm not going to go telling people, here's the ultimate scrapbooking game. But yet that's a huge activity with, middle America, and a lot of people, they want to kind of retain their memories, celebrate them, find a way to present them and share them with other people. So I'd say that scrapbooking is very close. SimCity, oddly enough, was really kind of a combination between a model train set and gardening. In gardening, you're planting things, you're seeing if they grow, you're trying to water them, you're trying to till the soil, and put a train set on top of that, and you have SimCity. So, in my mind, I will have these metaphors for what the game is doing, what it's trying to achieve, but those aren't necessarily the messages I'm going to use to then sell the idea to either my team or executives. So in some sense, you kind of have to split that. And you're selling this game at every step. I mean, back when games used to be in software stores, you'd be in the software store, you'd be looking at all these boxes. Right off the bat, that box has to look like something that's interesting and fun. You're already selling the game design at that point. You pick up the box and start reading the back of it, or online, you're looking at the description on the app store or whatever. But that's the point at which game design starts. What is the simplest version of the game that you can download into somebody's head from a brief description on the app store, so that they're already playing the game before they've even downloaded it. They're, in their head, they're imagining what would that game be like to play, just by reading a paragraph on the app store. That's the first game you have to design. If you design that game well, they might download it and try it. And now the first minute, that's the next game you're designing, is the first minute experience, something that, oh wow, I kind of like this. I can imagine that I might want to keep playing this. So you're actually designing a lot of different games. The final game in code is pretty far down the line. You're actually designing a lot of simpler versions that you have to be able to download into somebody's head very easily, that they're enjoying playing in their imagination as they imagine what that game might be.
Excellent.
All right, thank you for your answers. They were very helpful.
Sure.
Alize Tormund Davis, you had a related question. If you want to unmute.
Hi. My name is Alize, and I go to CSU. My major is game programming. And you already kind of answered my second part of my question, but the first part is that I noticed that you get a lot of your ideas from existing theories. So for example, Some Earth was created by Gaia's theory. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that the Sim Earth and Sim Ant were not as popular as SimCity and even The Sims, but mm-hmm. It have issues getting publishers to take on those titles. So would you say that people reject the individual ideas because they are afraid of public reception? Or how would you go about introducing ideas that are not common titles in today's game industry?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, in fact, all my games, even SimCity and The Sims, were based upon things that I read. I very much enjoy reading about science and theory, and especially looking for things that are kind of interdisciplinary, kind of span boundaries. And in most cases, I do a lot of very deep research, on Spore. I got to know people like Jill Tarter and Frank Drake, who did Drake's Equation. Sim Earth, I actually worked with James Lovelock, who did the Gaia hypothesis. Sim City was actually based on a lot of urban design theories. I got to know people like Christopher Alexander. So I've actually gotten to know E.O. Wilson, who did, all the ant research when I did Sim Ant. I've actually gotten to know most of the scientists that I was basing these on, which was really cool. But, there's kind of like, where the game inspiration came from. And then there's, as you're presenting to gamers or gaming companies, here's the, entertainment experience that I think people will enjoy. Oh, and by the way, it happens to be based upon this theory. At that point, people don't really buy a game because it's based upon a theory. They buy a game because it sounds like a fun activity to play with, So I kind of separate those in my mind, but I find that I get much more inspiration from, outside the game industry, from the real world, than I do from, looking at a game and saying, "Oh, I want to do a better version of that." Now, I do learn a lot by playing games. I play a lot of games, and I find myself, why am I playing this game so much? What is it that's hooking me? And I start trying to get to the underlying psychological factors that make me want to keep playing, World of Tanks or Order of Battle or whatever it is, Civilization. I really try to analyze in my head, why am I enjoying this? And why are other players enjoying that? But that's very different than kind of what kind of game do I want to make next, And for that, I try to keep a totally open mind. There's no constraints on that. What about the world? I think that one thing that really fascinates me about games is that they become a tool for understanding the world. That's why most of my games have at least kind of some foot in reality, because I like the idea that after you played a game a lot, you can walk away, and the way you look at reality is a little bit different. As I'm driving through the city, I'm actually kind of seeing industrial zones, commercial zones, wondering why they made that decision. Why is the transportation like this? Sims actually started as an architectural game. It was really about architecture, and then it evolved to be more about the people, because I found the players were enjoying, manipulating and torturing the little Sims a lot more than the constructive side. But yet, some of the players still, they would go into this time warp on the architecture side of the Sims. So, I'm not quite sure if this is answering your question, but I don't think selling the game idea has really been an issue about where the idea came from. So when I, was doing Sim Ant, it wasn't like, oh, we don't want to, we don't care about ant theory. It was more like, is it fun to play with ants? So I think for me, it's more a matter of, can I take parts of the real world that I find interesting and turn them into a toy? How can I turn that into something fun and interesting to play with? And I'm convinced that you can take anything. You can probably just take a rock out of your yard and make a game about it. If you zoom into that rock at some level, there are going to be little microbes living on it, and battles occurring, and algae, and whatever. There's some point you can look at almost anything in the world and put it through the right lens, and again, with some amount of caricature and exaggeration, and make it an entertaining experience. And so I think that's kind of more the way I think about it. So I don't really think that the two are at odds, that games about reality or theory are inherently harder to sell.
Okay, that answers it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be the rock that ends up in Charlie Brown's trick-or-treat bag.
Right.
Okay, we are at 4 our time, 1 o'clock Pacific time. Will, we got a lot of questions. I definitely want to be respectful of your time. You let us know if you're up for any more, and if so, about how much longer.
Yeah, let's take 2 or 3 more.
All right, 2 or 3 more. Kathy Estes, I'm going to prioritize yours because I think it ties in pretty well to what the question we just had before. So, Kathy, if you want to go ahead and ask your question about sequels and mechanics.
Hi, I'm Kathy Estes. I'm from Kennesaw State University. I'm an animation major. And I realize you weren't quite as involved in the sequels to The Sims, but I was wondering how mechanics you consider going from game to game. You see, like for instance, like how memories have changed throughout the Sims games, or like how aspirations have changed, and how you look at a mechanic and go, this is something I want to keep and expand on, or how you go, this is something that isn't working, let's adjust it, to dropping it altogether?
Yeah. Well, I was very involved with SimCity 2000, which was, one of the only sequels I kind of fully did. I mean, I was fairly involved in Sims 2, but for the most part, yeah, I hate sequels. I mean, I don't hate them, but that, in fact, is the one genre that apparently all executives are willing to fund for successful sequels. But after I did the first SimCity, we got a lot of correspondence, a lot of mail. This is back, before it was actually mail in the, post office in your mailbox that you open. And with The Sims too, any successful game, people say, oh, you should add this, add that. And then you get a million things that they want you to add, the kitchen sink, and that if you put all these things in, the game would be horrible. There's this old Japanese saying that I like, and it's about Japanese gardening, which in fact, there are a lot of lessons about game design to be learned from Japanese gardens. But it was that your garden is not complete until there's nothing else that you can remove. And really the idea is that, putting more stuff in doesn't necessarily make it better. Sometimes removing stuff, you really want to take the core stuff that's good and retain that and celebrate that. SimCity, there were a lot of technical limitations, and the technology had advanced to the point where now we could do things I wasn't able to do in the first SimCity, like 3D terrain and stuff like that. But I'd say that you learn a lot by viewing the players, but you don't necessarily do what the players tell you should do. They're not game designers, they're just, they're playing Grand Theft Auto and saying, oh, I wish you had motorcycles, and then you can go back and say, oh yeah, okay, motorcycles would be pretty cool in Grand Theft Auto. Or they might be saying, you should add this or that. But as the game designer, it's up to you to kind of sort through these things in your head. You're imagining, okay, what would that be? And so I think the game designer, kind of has a role there in terms of filtering the input a lot. As you get games with a lot of creative content, user-generated content, you can actually watch and see what the players are doing with it. And I found that extremely informative, just to see what directions the players went with it. And even, before we release a game, we do a lot of what we call Kleenex testing. We bring people in, put them in front of the game, and we don't say a word to them. And they'll be asking questions, how do I do this? How do I do that? We don't answer a thing. We just watch and see what they guess. And if they think the red button is supposed to do this and it does that, at some point, once you've seen 10 people pressing the red button when they think it does A, but in fact it does B, you start realizing you were wrong as a designer. Okay, it should do A. Everybody thinks it should do A. So I think there are different levels at which you learn how to filter that input as you're working on a sequel. But that is one of the trickier roles of game designers, filtering out the stuff that should not be in there, even though everybody is telling you it should be.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. One of the things I learned was that as a game designer, you have to listen to what players say they want and hear what they really need. And they're often different things. All right, since you said one more question, Hugo, in light of all your involvement in the GGD over the years, we'll let you go ahead and conclude, and let that be a lesson to the rest of you. Be involved in the GGDA, ask more questions of Will Wright. All right,
Thank
Hugo.
you, Andrew. Well, my mom is a psychoanalyst, so I was really interested by all these terms that you were using of ego and id, and it got me really curious about what made you choose this specific pathway to try and map the mind of the people and these terms. But also within the context of psychoanalysis, one of the big things is letting people come to their own conclusions about their connections and how that shapes them. Because if the analyst tells them, they can often be combative and refute and resist. But that's technically what Proxy is doing, is like showing you these connections that you didn't knew. So did you design for that? Did you design thinking about this possible resistance or refutal of connections?
Yeah. I mean, I think that one thing I really didn't go into is that at some point, as you start getting more and more memories in the system, it will start unveiling more and more maps of your mind, very specific maps. So at some point, you'll learn a phobia map. It'll show a map of your phobias, or your social map, or your recreational map. And I think that I want these to feel like kind of like a mirror. All the data is data that you've entered. Now we're doing kind of an analysis, but it's a fairly straightforward analysis of you tend to associate that person with funny, or you tend to associate that place with snow skiing, you know. So I think that that's going to feel fairly objective to the player. But at the same time, you know, and I started getting insights into myself. You know, God, I didn't realize I associated my father with Sundays or whatever it is, you know, but then I thought about it, it made sense. And most of the associations I saw that I wasn't aware of made total sense to me. And I understood kind of the memories that led Proxy to that conclusion. So the player, you know, if they have, you know, any kind of pushback, they have the power to go back and then kind of reorganize it, you know, and that's a lot of why we're letting the players organize these memories in their world. So Proxy might decide that these two memories are very related, but in your overt conscious mind, you might say, no, they really have nothing to do with each other, and you move them apart. So we're going to be looking at the way the player arranges these memories within the world to get a better sense of how the player wants to think about them, how the player overtly, consciously thinks about these things. But at the same time, I like the idea that as the Proxy evolves and becomes an avatar, that it is something that you've never met before. It's like you've never met your subconscious. You've never actually, you know, seen how it really thinks. One of the inspirations for Proxy was this old science fiction movie, Forbidden Planet. And in that movie, you know, this guy goes, they discover a scientist on this alien planet, and he's discovered all this alien machinery, and he connects it to his head, and he doesn't realize it, but it's actually amplifying his id and making it tangible on the planet. It becomes this monster, you know, but he doesn't realize it. But just the idea that your id is inside of you, it's in your mind, and there's something a little scary about it. You know, you've never really met this thing, you know, and a lot of the weird decisions and behaviors in your life are actually driven by your id, and you have a hard time even consciously explaining these things. So this is the aspect of Proxy I actually want to feel a little bit creepy, that for the first time you're meeting this, you know, thing inside of your mind that you've never really met before. You knew it was there, you felt it, but now we're actually trying to put a lens on it and take pictures of it and show you pictures of this thing to the point where you can now interact with it. So I think there does want to be a little bit of pushback that, you know, whoa, that's not me. I'm not like that, am I? You know, but still make it kind of transparent as to how it came to that conclusion.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. And for those of you who did not get your questions answered, please remember that we will have Will's keynote at Siege, 3 p.m. on Friday at Siege, 3 p.m. on Friday. It will be live streamed at youtube.com/Georgia Game Devs. Follow and subscribe now so you get the updates when it goes live. And that's where all of Siege will be happening, other than the workshops. The workshops will be in Zoom. And speaking of the workshops, Timothy Johnson, you crazy Californian you, why don't you tell us a little bit about what people can expect in the workshop?
Yeah, so I'm Timothy Johnson. I'm lead engineer at Will's Fun Factory here. So what we're doing on Sunday, Will's going to be talking about it a little bit Friday. We've got these, we're calling them the UGC tools for Proxy. So on Sunday, Rebecca Harrison, who's our art director, and myself are going to go through and kind of workshop the different tools that you can get from us and the types of content that you can create and publish and show up in Proxy. So we're gonna go through some examples. The tools are still super raw, like this is all really alpha, but this will let everyone see, okay, if you're an audio person or if you're a 3D modeler or whatever it is you are, that you can create these things and they will show up in the engine, which I think is pretty cool, as long as it works.
Andrew, can I clarify something?
Absolutely. Kim is no longer working for you.
Timothy's a honorary crazy Californian. He's actually from my hometown, Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right. I've been in California long enough for it to have driven me crazy. That's for sure.
He still shows up at our Georgia Game Dev meetups. So if you want to hassle him some more, check in on those. All right. Thank you, Will, Timothy, Lauren, Georgia, everybody else involved in putting this together. Thanks to all the professors for organizing a great collection of students for this.